This next tutorial is about how to make a block. So it's a pretty simple object we're going to make, but I like it as an introduction to making 3D objects. So I'm going to click here in negative space. I'm going to click on box and I'm going to expand the rollout for keyboard entry. So let's go down to length, width, and height. I'm going to give it a length of 100, a width of 50, and a height of 200. I'm just going to click create. I'm going to go down here to not the bottom rightmost, but the one above it, which is zoom extents all. Click on that. Now I've zoomed out. There's my box. So let's go to default shading here, click on that, and we're going to turn on edged faces. All right, now we can see what our model is made of. Now, red's not a good color for this. Let's go ahead and we're just going to do like a green, a lighter color, not red. All right, so all of our objects are made up of points. And what if we want to make something that's more than just these primitives, something more than we can get out of working with modifiers? So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to modify. We have a box, and we can adjust our length, width, and height segments. But what I want to do is I want to go in and start manipulating this object on the base mesh level. And to do that, we're going to use a modifier called Edit Poly. Edit Poly gives us access to all the components that make up an object. Now, alternatively, if I use the trash to get rid of that, I could right-click on this model and go down to Convert To and say Convert to Editable Poly. Now this is an editable poly. Both get you the same end result. Right? Once you put an Edit Poly onto a model, you never really want to go back to the box settings because once you get into Edit Poly, you're going to start changing the basic structure of it, the number of vertices, edges, and points. So having an editable poly is the best option. So I'm going to click on the arrow to expand it. Now you can see here's the different components that make up the object. You can also see there's a rollout called selection, and if you can't find it, just start collapsing rollouts until you find it. And also double check to make sure. By default, you probably have like one column over here. It may be thicker or thinner. I'm just going to click and drag this over so I have two. Once you start getting into editable poly, you start to see that there's a lot more rollouts, a lot more information. Some rollouts like selection are always going to be there, and they allow you to switch between the different subcomponents that make up a model. Right? Vertex, the little points out there, edges, right? The span between two of them, borders, which this object doesn't have, polygon, which are these flat surfaces, and then element, which if I click, will select all the different components, contiguously part of it. That means everything connected to that specifically. So what we want to do is we want to take this object, we want to add more detail to it, because if I just grab a point here and move it, I can move it, but it doesn't give me a lot of options. We need to get more detail. So I'm going to go to edge. I'm going to click on one edge, one of these vertical tall edges, and under selection I'm going to click ring. Ring grabs every parallel edge going all the way around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a rollout called Edit Edges, right? Which for me happens to be here. You may have to collapse your rollouts to find it. And I'm going to click on the little box next to the word connect, and that opens the settings. Now you can see I can adjust the number of settings. I could set that to 3. Right? And now I've added more settings. Now if I accidentally click off, nothing gets it. If I come back in and start manually clicking, it'll click on whichever ones I select. Really, your best bet's to click on one edge and then hit ring, and it'll grab all those parallel edges, because you want to make sure anytime you're connecting, as much as possible, you're connecting entire rings, so you keep your model made primarily out of 4-sided polygons. I'm going to click OK. I'm happy with that. Now it's grab one of these edges here, right? One of the base ones, not the narrow one, but the longer one. And again, I'm going to hit ring. I'm going to open up connect, and we're going to adjust this down to 2, right? I only want to add 2 segments and click OK. So now I got some meat on this. I can go into vertex now, and here on left I can come in and I'm going to click in negative space and drag so I select the vertex in both the front and the back. And I can just move them. I'm going to region select and move them. And see, by doing this, I can start to make my model look a little bit more interesting just by maneuvering the shape around. All I'm doing is just selecting some points, moving them a little bit. You can even go in, and if I go into Polygon, oops, I'm going to click, I'm going to hold Control to select multiples here. And then I'm going to grab that X handle because I want to move it out. Really, I'm being very precise in my motions. If I right click to make this active, I don't want to just randomly grab it and move it because I want to keep that base flat. So I'm going to carefully come in and select these, hover over X, and just kind of move it out slightly. And maybe deselect one. There we go. And maybe I'll grab that edge on the bottom and move him in just a little. And so I'm being very specific, very subtle. Control R will bring up orbit for you to move around, and you can do the same thing on the back side. Just kind of grab those polygons, pull them out. Grab that edge, move it back in. And so some people would be silly, why are you making a block? I think this is a very good basic introduction to making an object like this. We could even come in here, there's even more, like we could grab vertex points, go into rotate, kind of rotate them around. It doesn't have to all be absolutely perfect. Now deselect, hold Alt and region select, and I deselected them. I can move it around a little bit. Now, there we go. We got us a pretty interesting looking rock. Let's make it take a little bit further, and that's just manipulating the basic shapes. Let's grab this edge. I'm going to scale him in. Let's scale this one, over around. I just kind of want to get the ones that are kind of make up this sort of top row. And I'm calling it a top row because they were the original 3 polygons at the very top of the box. You can see there's an intersection of just 3 points. I'm going to double click. When I double click, it grabs an entire loop. Double click here. It's basically going to select edges at 4 pointed intersections until it hits an intersection of 3 or more than 4. I'm going to hold Control. I'm going to go around, and I kind of want to get all the edges that make up the primary surface of this block, with the exception of the bottom. I don't want the ones on the bottom, right? And I don't want every intersection here, but these coming off of this 3-point intersection and then kind of that top line and the sides. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go next to Chamfer is a settings dialog. I'm going to increase that number. I'm going to click and drag, take it up like, it's just, maybe we'll set it to like 5. What if I type in 5? There we go. I'm going to reduce the connect edge segments to 0. But now, see how that kind of takes that edge? Basically, Chamfer is going to separate whatever you have selected by a numeric amount. You want to be careful that you don't start to overlap when you do it. If you start to drag over, you start getting this inside-out geometry. It's really bad. You don't want to do that. There we go. So now I kind of have some nice sides. I'm going to click OK. And now if I hit F4, right, or if I come up here and turn off edged faces, we see our base model. You see how it has these weird lines, like the shading, the surface of it that's broken? All that is if I go into Element and click on the model, there's a rollout called Polygon Smoothing Groups. And you can go in here, and this is where you say between these 2 surfaces, I want it to be smooth or I want it to be a hard surface. If I hit Clear All, you see how the entire thing's faceted. But if I click on my model and hit Auto Smooth, it goes through, and based on the direction that the surface is facing, it goes through and smooths it out. So if I orbit around, you'll see, hey, look at that. So there you go. This is kind of the basics. That's working with going into the different subcomponents, selecting them, manipulating them, using chamfer, using smoothing groups. And so just getting familiar with it. So go ahead and save this and take a snip of it and turn in the max file in the image.